Okay. So how is everybody doing today? Good? Yes? All right, cool. So we're going to talk about continuing education and trade schools. So Suman, thank you for your question. We're going to talk about that a lot today. What we did last week, so Maria was with us, but I'm not sure. Suman, is that how to pronounce your name? Did I pronounce it?
Sumin.
Sumin.
Yeah.
Sumin, you were not with us last week, is that right? You were. Did you come last week?
I come last week a little bit late.
Okay. All right. So good. So we're just going to review quickly then. So we talked about what is continuing education. And that is something where you go and you do some formal education of some sort. So usually that's classes, and we can do that at the community college. We can do that sometimes even at the Literacy Council. We can take courses online. There are different ways that we do that. And the benefits could be for our job. It could be for pay. It could be just for making ourselves better, like some of what Raul was talking about, of picking up new habits. Or it could be picking up new skills, or it could be changing careers. So it could be any of those. And when you are figuring out whether you want to do continuing education, then you would want to know, can you afford it? What are the benefits for you? Do you have the time? And then it's different from college generally, although some of the things that we talk about for continuing education could be at the community college, but it's different from college because usually it's less money and it's less time, and you can usually get some sort of immediate, more quicker benefit to it. And we talked about different types of continuing education in those different places. So you'll remember that. And we talked about how to pay for it, that sometimes we can get scholarships and grants, and sometimes we take loans, and sometimes we can get our employers to pay for it if it has to do with our job. And then we talked about all the different places that we could go for continuing education. And that was a lot of different places, if you remember. So today we're going to talk about learning a trade. So Sumin asked a good question, what is a trade job? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how do we decide if learning a trade is right? Where do you go to learn it? How do you pay for it? And some examples of how to learn the trade. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. So now let's just start. And Barb is going to talk to you about what is a trade job.
Okay, so basically a trade job is work that requires specialized skills, not necessarily though those that you would get at a four-year college. Normally, these skills are acquired through a combination of classroom and practical learning. In other words, learning more on the job or maybe in a classroom where you're practicing those types of skills that are going to be important. So it's different than a four-year degree at a college, which tends to be more geared to a broader set of learning objectives and not necessarily geared toward a specific job. Normally, what we're talking about with trade job education is those specific skills that get you a specific job. In addition, frequently you learn the skills on the job or in some kind of organized practical training experience. Where might you get this kind of learning experience? A trade school and a technical institution. They're somewhat similar learning institutions. A two-year college. Community colleges offer different types of these certification programs. And then there are some other organizations that also offer certification programs for certain types of trade jobs. And we'll get into a little bit more detail in just a bit. Okay, if we move on, let's take a look at some examples of trade jobs. Just to start your thinking. Dental hygienist, for example. In other words, it's the person that helps the dentist when you go and perhaps cleans your teeth, hands the dentist certain implements and so forth as he's working. Hairdresser, cosmetologist. Believe it or not, there is specific training for those folks. Solar technician, one of the newer kinds of trade jobs, the folks that are installing those solar panels on rooftops and in big fields and maintaining them. And a well-known one, perhaps the auto mechanic, which is an increasingly technical job because let's face it, these cars that we drive around in are almost like little rolling computers in this day and age. So that's just to get you started as an example of some trade jobs, but let's just pause for a minute. And if we go on to the next slide, what are some other trade jobs that pop into your mind as you think about some examples? And anybody think of another example? There are 2 or 3 that are pretty well known. Anybody want to guess?
A nurse, nursery.
Nurse, yeah. It's interesting. Nurse is right on the boundary line, if you will, between very highly skilled, because some nurses become almost like doctors and they can get PhDs and then they can teach nursing and so forth. But there's a whole group of nurses that aren't as skilled and they do an enormous amount of work. So yes, great example.
Tremaine says cosmetologist or carpentry.
Yes, exactly. Cosmetologist. Anybody want to offer one more?
Barb, did you hear carpentry?
No, I didn't.
Carpenter?
I'm sorry. Thank you. Carpentry. Tried and true.
So do you want to explain what that is?
Did anybody
Do you
want
want to explain what a carpenter is?
I'm happy to, but Tremaine, was that yours? Okay. The carpenters, the folks that build the buildings, whether they're the ones that are building the houses around the neighborhood or the larger buildings in downtown places. There's an enormous variety of people in that particular trade or sort of family of trade jobs, because not just the ones that are hammering the nails into the wood, but think about all of those other types of work that need to go to building a building, the electricians, the plumbers, the welders for those bigger buildings. There's a lot of trade jobs when you look at any building that's represented in that building. Okay, let's go on to the next page just to take a look at yet another list. The locksmith. Okay, you've built your house. Somebody puts the locks on the doors, right? And somebody also helps you get back into the house when you lock yourself out, which I have done. Welders, the people who are putting the pipes together, melting the metal so that it fits well. Realtors, the ones who sell you those houses. Bartender can be quite good paying on a good night and fun for some. Personal trainer, the folks that help you learn how to use all that equipment at the gym so you don't hurt yourself and you get all nice and healthy. Dog groomer. Now your dog looks nice too as you take it for a walk. Massage therapist, wind turbine technician, again, another more contemporary job in that those are the big windmills. Somebody's got to put them up and somebody's got to maintain them. So another highly technical job of the 21st century. The point of just walking through these lists and doing a little bit of thinking about what is a trade job is really they're all around us. Pretty much every place you look. I just learned that those folks who are surveying, all of the road construction these days, and the road building these days, and the road repair these days, a bunch of those guys that are out there surveying and carrying around clipboards and looking at diagrams. Those are technicians, transportation technicians, yet another trade job. So lots of opportunities and lots of jobs all around us. And with that, I'll turn it back to Deb.
Okay, so you learned about what some of those jobs are, trade jobs. And now let's talk about whether that would be a good opportunity for you or somebody you know. So the first thing that we talk about is, do you already have some skills that could be a trade? So, if you are talking about cosmetology, somebody who does a lot of makeup, if that's something that you already do as a hobby, you could maybe go back to trade school and get a certificate for that, or hair cutting. You could have something where you really like to cook, and maybe you would want to go to a culinary institute, which is a school for cooking, that would help you get a job in a restaurant. So those are all things where you already like to do something, and then you could turn it into something else. Do you like hands-on work? Generally, when we talk about trade schools and trade jobs, those are not things where you're sitting at a computer. Generally, those are things where you're doing things actively. So some of the things that Barb just told you about, like construction, building buildings, or grooming a dog, or working in a salon, those are all things where you're doing it in person and you're doing activities as opposed to sitting at a computer and doing things remote. So if you like that kind of thing, that can be interesting. And then here's another question. Are you willing to just start in a field? Because generally in a trade job, you can't just go into a high level job. You have to start and work your way up. And so if that's something that you're willing to do, then it could be a good step for you. And then also, do you need to find employment soon? And so again, if you're going to go take a course or go to some sort of school, but you need to work right away, you need to decide if you can fit that into your life and your work schedule, or if you need to plan for that for the future. Can you train for a part-time occupation? So a lot of people also will keep their steady job and then do something else on the side to make more money. And that's an opportunity as well. And then is there a continuing high demand for workers in this trade? And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So I'm going to stop right now. Do you guys have any questions, Samin or Maria? So when we talk about jobs in high demand, some of these are all the time and some of them come and go. So some of the things that are very, very much in demand right now that you probably know all about are anything to do with healthcare, particularly with the pandemic, right? That there's a shortage of people who are nurses and doctors and assistants in hospitals and ambulance people and all kinds of healthcare type things. So that's very, very much in demand. It's usually in high demand, but especially so since we've had all of the pandemic issues. Construction. Construction is also very busy right now. So that comes and goes a little bit, but it has been very busy the last several years. Manufacturing, we didn't talk about that. In factories where we make products, so, you know, the places that make things that we use all the time, whether that's detergent for washing dishes or clothes, or making boxes for all the things that are getting sent to us in the mail. There's all kinds of manufacturing. Trucking, we didn't talk about trucking, but you know, especially with people ordering things online and getting them delivered, there's a lot of people who have to get those things to your house, right? To deliver them from the warehouse. And those are people who are driving trucks. That's important. Bookkeeping, accounting, and auditing. So that's a trade job. And that's a little bit different than what I just told you, because generally those are people who are on the computer. But that's not usually the trade jobs that we talk about. Veterinary technician, that's somebody who helps with the animal doctor. So those might be people who check you in, who help give your animals the drugs. And we talked about some of these other things: food services, dental care, the people who clean your teeth, hairstyling and cosmetology, the people who work on your car. Okay, so does that make sense to you now, Samin, about what is a trade job and what are some of the things that are examples? Yeah, you're on mute, can't hear you.
Sorry. I think about the trade job is bookkeeping and accounting,
Yeah,
and computer support, and
Yeah.
hair styling, and
cosmetology, that's makeup.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good. All right, so where do you go to do these things, to learn these things? Well, it depends, and it depends a lot on which trade you're talking about. So we just talked about a lot of different kinds of trades a minute ago. And so whichever trade you're interested in, there are different places to go to learn that. So you're obviously not going to go to the same place or the same courses to learn about doing hair and your car, right? So then you also have to think about the level of competency you have. So that means, what do you already know? What do you still have to learn? How much time can you invest? So do you want to go full-time to go get some of this education, or you want to do it part-time, like we just talked about before, while you're doing other things, either working at a job or staying at home with your children? There are all kinds of things where you can do those things. You can learn part-time, or you can go full-time and just do it all at the same time. And then how much does it cost? Because again, like we talked about last week and we talked about last month for college, all of these things may cost something that you have to figure out how to have money for. And then, are there apprenticeships available in the area that you want to work in? Apprenticeships, and we're going to talk about this some more, are places where you can go and learn while you're doing the job, and somebody else will help teach you while you're helping them. So somebody more experienced helps teach you while you're learning to get better, but you also get paid usually. Okay? And so where you go, I just said it depends on what you want to do, and it depends on which trade, but there are a couple different places that we go to learn a trade. So the first one is And Barb said they were pretty much the same thing, a trade school or a technical institute, and they're sometimes also called vocational schools. And they teach different trades. And sometimes you can go and they do a whole lot of different trades, but sometimes they are very, very specific. So for instance, if you wanted to learn how to do hair and makeup, you would go to what we call a cosmetology school. And that's what they do. That's all they do. Culinary institutes means food. And they would just do something about food. So they wouldn't do anything about hair. They wouldn't do anything about cars. They would just be working on food. And then community colleges. And we've talked about community colleges last week and last month. And they have certification courses for a lot of different things. They have a huge variety often. And often they're shorter courses for certification, or you can have a 2 or 3 year program as well. And so again, it depends on what you really want to do, but there are a lot of options at the community colleges. We're very lucky in this area. We have Montgomery College here in Montgomery County, and we have Prince George's County right across the border. And both of those have very, very good community colleges with a couple of different campuses. And then apprenticeships, and I just talked about that very briefly. And that is, you get paid while you learn. And Maryland has an apprenticeship and training program. And we're going to give you a lot of links later on in this presentation as examples, but that's not everything that you're going to be able to find if you go and Google them. And then there are trade union offices. And so the things that are trade union jobs are things like electrician and plumber. And again, a lot of those trade job kinds of things, construction, you can find a union that will help you do things. And they are always looking for new people. So with that, I'm going to give you back to Barb so she can talk to you about how to pay for it. And Barb, you're on mute.
Thank you. Not surprisingly, it's somewhat similar to when we talked about colleges and how to fund college. Probably the first question to ask is, beyond whatever savings you might have, are there grants, are there scholarships or scholarship programs that I can apply for given my particular interest, the particular job I'm interested in training for? These grants, scholarships, or even loans might be part of a school program or might be part of a program within the schools. So as you're working through your one, what your goal is, and two, how you're going to be approaching it, ask and look for opportunities for grants and scholarships. And if you'll remember from earlier presentations, the scholarship is an opportunity for funding where you do not have to repay it. And usually grants are similar, but there might be a little bit more fine print. So make sure you know what the requirements are. There could be grants and scholarships from the industry itself. So especially if there are an industry with some kind of organization that represents it, that's how you would look for possible funding for a certificate program or a particular courses to qualify you for a particular job. And as we always recommend, and Anne, I believe, was the one who said last week, we say Google a lot. And it's amazing what Googling these topics will enable you to learn as you're doing your background research on how should I get to where I need to go. So this is probably the first step in your process of understanding what are my choices for funding this education is get out the computer and start Googling. Deb just mentioned the apprenticeship idea. It's built into learning for specific trades. But you could consider, and obviously because it's a payment while you work, it's a more efficient and less burdensome way of learning than having to find additional money. But an idea that's linked to that is ask your employer if the employer would be willing to pay for a particular certificate or additional training in a particular job, because there are employers who will say yes if this skill, if this improvement in skills is going to benefit them. So that's not exactly the same thing as an apprenticeship, but you are still working for that employer, and the employer is then assuming the liability, if you will, of paying for that particular course or set of courses to get you those additional skills. So not the same thing as an apprenticeship, but there's a little bit of a link there. And finally, back to this last possibility, which is loans. And we always advise that can try to find and research thoroughly the other options first, because of course, when you start thinking about getting a loan to pay for education, unfortunately, loans need to be paid back. Unfortunately, loans usually come with interest charges. And especially if you already have debt, that can be just increasing a burden that can be difficult then to manage. So these are options to think about, and you can talk to your bank at least to know what might the possibilities be, and certainly ask whomever you're discussing loans with about payment plan options, so you know exactly when those amounts are due and aren't surprised midway through a program. And therefore burdened by yet another expense that you didn't expect. So with that, what we'd like to do now is switch gears a little bit and talk about a couple of specific examples, just to think through what might this look like. And the first example that we've put together has to do with Maria, who wants to be a registered nurse. So that is her goal, or she thinks that's her goal. And her background is that she has been looking after her aging parents, and she loves taking care of people. So she thinks that this might be a good idea. She knows that a registered nurse is well paid and definitely in demand for employment. So she knows that's a good career option longer term. And now she's got to think about, how does she get there? Because she does not have any particular training yet in this field. So the first option is to train to be a registered nurse. How does one do that? Well, there is the 4-year college degree in nursing. You get a bachelor's degree and you get all of the technical training to become a registered nurse. There's also a 2 to 3 year degree in nursing. This is where you could go to a community college and get an associate's degree. And then finally, another option is to get a diploma from a nursing program. For example, some hospitals offer programs This is almost an example of, okay, here's an employer. They know they need nurses in the future. So let's start training some people to become nurses right now. In any case, to become a registered nurse, you do have to take a special examination to become fully qualified for that particular job. So just going to college and graduating from college doesn't actually get you that qualification to be a registered nurse. Okay, so that's one set of options. It's go to school and get past that exam. The second and third are the first would be start as a home health aide. And then the second idea might be, what are other jobs in the medical field that Maria might consider, like a pharmacy technician or an other kind of medical technician like EKG or radiation, for example. So let's think about this a little bit more. Home health aide, what do they do? Well, they help out people who are having difficulty with basic care. This type of job does not require certification. So it's relatively easy to get this job. And certification is available from various sources like community colleges. So it wouldn't be that difficult to get certification. If you wanted a little bit more experience and a little bit, if Maria wanted a little bit more basic skills to be able to do this job well. And if she were to take this kind of a job, it would give her a feel for whether she likes working in something of a medical setting and helping people, not just her parents, but other people. Okay, so that's an idea. Another idea is pursuing the idea of that medical field job, some kind of technician job. And the benefits are, yes, you could get that certification in a lot less time than it takes to become a registered nurse. And certifications are available at community colleges. So we know that those tend to be less expensive courses to take to get the certification that Maria might need. So if we move on to the big question, if Maria's goal, she thinks, is to be a registered nurse, and she's got 3 basic types of choices to go and study to become a registered nurse, or to try a couple of different types of jobs. One is in home health care as an aide. One is to become a medical technician, which would require some certification, some study, but not nearly as much as that registered nurse. What do you think about Maria's choices? Sort of what are the good parts of these choices? What are the bad parts? What would you advise Maria to do? Thoughts? Suming?
I think here's the good part.
The pay is the good part? Yeah. When you think about that health care worker, the good part is Maria thinks she wants to be a registered nurse because she was helping her parents at home and she likes caring for people. Okay. And if she takes the home health care job, she does more of that and she gets paid. And she can decide if this is a good direction or not. Yeah. What might be the not so good part of that choice? Anybody have some ideas on that?
So the pay is not as good for that.
True. The pay is not nearly as good as if she were to have a nursing kind of job. More nursing, less taking care of someone. Yeah.
And Raoul says many work hours.
Yes. It can be difficult, a difficult schedule, and sometimes being called in when you don't expect to be called in.
So what about the technician things?
Yeah. Any thoughts about being a technician of some kind?
I think Tremaine says a good point in that she realizes that she doesn't enjoy working with others in that capacity, because there is a difference between caring for your family and loved ones versus caring for strangers.
Ooh, that could be a huge learning experience. Back to Suming's point about, okay, you get some money, and Tremaine's, which is you learn whether this is really comparable, that, yeah, taking care of your parents is one thing, taking care of basically strangers could be very different. And it would be unfortunate to go down the nursing school road and then discover, oh my gosh, I don't particularly like taking care of people. Okay, good points. Back to Deb's question before we move on is, what about this idea of medical technician? As well, I think I like people. And this is medical, and that I had to deal with that a little bit with my parents.
Barbara, may I make a comment or two?
Of course.
Working in these other environments, a home health aide or the med technician, will at least introduce you to working in a medical environment and get you the experience of working, say, with other doctors and medical professionals. So even if you find that a particular environment, such as a home health aide, may not be a good long-range goal for yourself, you will nonetheless learn something about working in the medical profession.
That's a very good point, Carol. And certainly that is one of the benefits of trying to connect your goal with some type of work experience to see, is it working for you? Do I like this area of work, even if I don't like this particular job? Mm-hmm. So yeah, because you can change as you go. You discover, I really don't like working with people that I don't know, taking care of them, but I'm fascinated by how medicines are formulated and helping to manage those productions, if you will, because that's what some of these med techs do, and even advise people, customers, on some of the choices based on what their doctors are either prescribing or leaving to them to figure out. So yeah, it does expose people to that area of work, which can be very helpful in understanding your long-term career goal. Okay, but obviously with this example, you can start to feel those trade-offs between how much time do I have for learning and for working how much is it going to cost? And really, to Carol's point, what is my goal? Am I sure that this goal is the right one for me? Because sometimes we may just jump over that before we've really based it on some experience, some knowledge that is helpful in understanding our best choice. Okay, great observations. And I'm going to turn it back to Deb for yet another example.
Okay, so we have a new example. This is Miguel. He wants to work in the food industry. He loves cooking. He likes baking cakes. He does this at home. And his goal is to own his own catering business. That means that he would go and do provide the food for parties or just events. And that's his goal. Remember, we talked about the resources that you have. Well, for time, he already has a full-time job. And so he's not going to give up his full-time job to go do this yet. He's going to use weekends and evenings to get started. Okay, so that he's already decided that that's how he's doing it in the time period. So we have a couple of options for you to think about for him too. So we could do a cooking cake decorating class because he really likes the cakes. He could do that online or in person, and then he could sell birthday cakes to his friends. He can also go to his community college or a culinary arts school. Remember, we said culinary arts means food, cooking. And he could get a certificate from that course, which means he's going to go take classes. And then if he got that certificate, it would enable him, it would allow him to get a job at a restaurant maybe, or a hotel or a cafeteria, or even a grocery store where they bake their own cakes and rolls and breads.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
I'm trying to find culinary arts in Montgomery College, but I didn't find the certificate. Do you know another community college who has the culinary arts certificate?
We don't know. I don't think we know that offhand, but we could maybe check for you. We'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Oh, Tremaine says she can provide that.
Thank you, Tremaine.
There's
Awesome.
in my recent job newsletter, there's something I shared about certificate in culinary. So I will share that with you, Maria.
Thank you, Raul. I like to cook as a hobby, and I think that it could help me to improve my English too. So that is the reason that I like to find some culinary art.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we'll get you some resources. So there's one more option that I want to tell you about Miguel that I want you to think about, is that he could go and get some business classes and culinary arts, because he's going to want to run his own company. And when you run your own company, there are a lot of things that you have to do on the business side to be able to think about billing, sending a bill to your customers and getting paid and managing some of that and taking orders and making sure they get done on time. So there's a lot of things that are associated with that. So I want you to think about all of those things. So these are the options now. Remember, he's going to keep working full time. He wants to do weekends and evenings to do on the other things that he wants to get started with. And we're going to talk about taking a class and then selling birthday cakes to his friends, or taking a certificate course and either getting a culinary arts degree, cooking and culinary arts by itself, or adding also to the culinary piece, the business piece. Okay, think about that for a minute. What do you think are the good parts and the bad parts about those choices? If he does the birthday cake to his friends, what are the good parts and the bad parts about that?
The good part is that he likes to cook, so he will be fine to cook birthday cakes for his friends.
Okay. And what are the bad parts of that, Maria?
I don't know, because he likes. I don't know what is the bad parts.
Anybody else can think of a bad part about that part? About selling birthday cakes to his friends?
Just in case if his friend does invite him to the party, is the bad part.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, how many friends do we have that have birthdays all the time? Right?
Oh, yes.
So if he wants to run it as a business, there's a limit, right? There's not he can't do it all the time. Okay, so let's think about going to school and getting a certificate just for the cooking pieces. What's the benefits to that? What's the good parts about that?
Learn new skills.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And also it helps him probably get a job at a place, right? At a hotel or a restaurant or a bakery or a grocery store, because a lot of times they want somebody who's already trained. They don't want just somebody who's doing it in their own kitchen, right? Because when you go into a public area for preparing food, there's a lot of hygiene and safety procedures that you need to know, and different skills that might be different from what he's just doing in his own kitchen, right? Okay, and then what about when he looks at the option of doing a culinary course and a business course? Good parts, bad parts? What's a good part? Barb?
Well, I think one of the good parts is if he's serious about really wanting his own business, then being able to start thinking in those business terms is going to be important for that longer term goal. And what we don't know, I think what's difficult is we don't know how much money he's making now, so that we don't know really what his, how much he has to worry about the costs of school.
Okay, so that might be the bad part, is how much school costs and how much more time it might take him to take all of those courses.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm reading this as a he's a little bit more experienced employee, and he's thinking about a big change in his world. So it might be doable if he's got some cushion there.
Okay. All right. So any other thoughts about that? Anybody?
I don't know if it would be a bad part, but if he does them, then it's good for him. All the marketing that he has to do to promote the business. He's got to do business cards and social media accounts and probably a website, because people are going to ask. They're like, do you have a website that we can check to see all your cakes and how your business runs? And everything is social media nowadays. So he's going to have to do some more, think about all of the marketing that has to go into not just doing business with family and friends, but if he wants more business, he's going to have to promote to the community as well.
Right. And there are costs to those things, aren't there? So he needs to plan for a lot of that. And that's where business courses might help him a lot. Okay,
and
good.
if he's going to open his own catering business eventually, he's going to have to perhaps hire people to work for him and be knowledgeable about employment laws, and also find a facility from which to work.
All good points. All right, so lots to think about, right? Whenever you want to make a change. Okay, we're sort of running out of time, so I'm going to give it back to Barb to kind of wind up.
Okay, real quickly then, as far as where to start in looking for Googling information, what we've done here is put 4 different examples. This is just to get you started. We've mentioned Montgomery College several times. This is their website. They have a number of programs to take a look at. Maryland Apprenticeship and Training Program is the program that Deb mentioned earlier. This is the state of Maryland's apprenticeship program. There are a number of different jobs, and the state helps with connecting the possible student to a program. We included the website for the electricians, the local electricians union, just to give you an example. There's a trade, that's a trade job, electrician with a union, and a program, a set of programs and structure for learning this particular trade. And then, of course, there's the Literacy Council, and which has a community resource manager. If you want somebody to touch base with and help you think through some of these options for how to think about trade schools and trade jobs and whether they're right for you. Okay. And with that, let's just wrap it up. Our first chapter last week had to do with more generally what continuing education was all about, but today we really focused in on trade jobs and trade schools. We talked a lot about many different types of jobs, and then some of the thinking process about if a trade job is right for you, where to go to learn a particular trade, and the answer is lots of options. And this is where you have to do some research to find what might work best for you, how to pay for it. Not unlike college, there are grants, there are scholarships, there are loans. Again, the balance of what makes sense for you. And then we did play around a little bit with a couple of examples of people who are struggling with, here's my goal, how do I get there? So with that, are there any final questions as we're wrapping up? No, I don't. It seems like we've answered your questions, and thank you so much for being here, and I will turn it back to Tremaine.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful workshop, learning all about trades and how you can, the different types of trades. I know this information was useful to those that participated. Maria, I have placed inside of the chat information regarding the culinary training program for you for a person that is learning English. So you can look at the information there. There's an email. It also shares information regarding what the training entails and when it starts. And for anyone that is looking for any employment opportunities in certain fields, please make sure you reach out to me where I can offer you some guidance in ensuring that your resume is established properly, and also that you are seeking employment in an area in which you are most comfortable with and you are most happy with. So thank you for joining. You will receive notifications for our next course. We'll keep this information open, Maria, for you to copy it. But again, my email is inside of the chat as well for you to reach out to me directly. And we could talk about this a little bit more. So thank you so much, Suman, Lucy, and Yami. Thank you so much for joining us today.